A heavy feeling hangs in the air as the eclectic group of volunteers are escorted towards the fairy circle. Most of them are Fae, and those who are familiar with travelling to the Mists, all with the exception of Datura Shinzo. Datura, Knight's commander and apprentice of Lord Water, has had a bit of a tense relationship with the Fae, and with the town of Holdfast in general. The black sheep of the party, he ignored the sideways glances of his companions. He could only imagine their confusion. His willing participation in anything to do with the Mists was a shock, even to him. He had his reasons. Despite his gruff attitude and lack of social graces, Holdfast was his home, and he'd sworn to protect it. If that meant putting his ego aside and falling on his sword, he wouldn't hesitate. Before him, Lady Val led with an elegant confidence. Taking orders from anyone outside Degrin wasn't something he took lightly, but he'd have to trust her on this one. He had no idea what they were about to walk into. Once on the fairy trail, they waited intently for Lady Val's instructions. From her sleeve, she retrieves an ornate wand, beautifully decorated with flowers, the likes of which Datura had never encountered. She motions it in 7 large Widdershin circles, touching upon 7 separate points in the ring. After some quiet chanting, she calls upon Fairy to answer. A shroud of thick, sweet fog slowly creeps out of the fairy ring and engulfs the party. Datura took a deep breath, steadying his heart after a jolt of adrenaline. The noise and commotion of Holdfast disappeared into the distance and turned to a calm silence. He noted how the landscapes around him remained the same, as if they hadn't gone anywhere at all, but instead the mists had made themselves a presence within the forests. One by one, Lady Val motions them to step further into the fog. First to go is Timian. He closes his eyes and tilts his head towards the sky. He's still for a while, but the time seemed to pass effortlessly. Next to go is Bikbun, a dwarf of the Ironbones clan. He repeats the same steps and returns to the line. Next is Hare, then Torvalis, and the others in the group, until at last they reach Datura. Looking to Val for confirmation, she smiles and waves him forward. Copying the others, he closes his eyes and tilts his head to the sky, waiting for something to happen. Suddenly, a powerful energy falls upon him and forces its way inside his mind. Fairy is rifling through his every thought, searching his morals and intentions. Though it is not painful, it is uncomfortable, invasive, and unsettling. After what feels like hours, they loosen their grip on him. He gets the sense it's now his turn to speak. He takes a moment to collect himself and begins his plea.
This is a matter of war. Our people stand on the brink of destruction, and we need a weapon. I see here smiths, council members, tricksters, farmers, madmen, and hunters. I stand before you as the only true warrior. I am human, and you are not my gods, but human and Fae alike are at risk of annihilation. I believe the only way to better myself and protect my people is to become a member of Fae itself. I have personally witnessed the power of the imps, and having one among our ranks would only increase our chances of succeeding in the oncoming battle. I am here to volunteer myself.
Fairy is still for a moment. It would seem that their pleas are being considered. A sudden feeling of restfulness washes over him, and in his mind, he hears a message.
We have heard your petition. You are all so strong, much stronger than you know. Whether by yourself or united as a group, remember your strengths. Use your skills. What help we send will be there in time.
As the powerful presence of the mist slowly recedes, it leaves behind not only a sense of calm, but some strange gifts as well. Glowing orbs, evident but nearly intangible, lazily drift in the air before each member of the group. Datura reaches forward, allowing the orb to bind itself to him. Though it makes him feel a bit more powerful than usual, the ordeal has left him in need of some rest. As the weeks passed, Datura saw more and more the problems with the rifts coming to a head. For starters, those touched with psychic visions foresaw violence, great loss, and death. On top of that, the champions of the elements had received grave messages from their respective lords to prepare for war and protect the circles. Should they fall, all would be lost. Finally, Arden and Guruk had suddenly and unexpectedly been turned into imps. Though unclear if this was fairies doing or not, it seemed to confirm war was on the horizon. Usually, the knights and the brigade would take charge in the protection of Holdfast. However, this battle would be different. Every single person and skill would be needed if they were to see even the smallest amount of success. A meeting was called to strategize a plan. Holdfast would split into 3 groups. The first group would defend the circles on the northern side of town, air and fire. Group 2 would guard the southern circles, water and earth. The third and smallest group would consist of a support team, running back and forth between the 2 main groups, while keeping an eye on the more centralized fairy circle. Among the teams, medics, archers, mages, and heavy combatants were divided. Smiths were strategically planted throughout the grounds, made readily available for repairs. From across the room, Datura met the eyes of Asha Fairchild. She sat hunched, her elbows on her knees, a long braid dangling over her shoulder. She gave him a nod. Asha was the water champion, and he the apprentice. He heard the message loud and clear. The 2 would camp themselves at the circle and defend it. He returned a nod of agreement. The 2 have had their differences in the past, but when it came to defending their element, they made a hell of a team. With everyone in agreement, the meeting adjourned and dissipated into chatter. But before anyone could leave, a knight, clad in silver and red armor, entered the inn. Pierre, who had previously been absent, stood before the crowd and cleared his throat. The chattering quickly went silent. He had earned a great amount of respect within Holdfast, and when he had something to say, all listened. He explained that Fairy had sent a messenger, Siblessa, to deliver something of importance. In front of him he held a strange ball. It appeared to be a skin wrapped up like yarn. It was scaly, snakeskin-like, coloured gold and iridescent in its perfect patterns. Anyone with even the slightest skill in magic could tell there was something extraordinary about this item. Though she hadn't told him much about its makeup, it came with a basic set of instructions. Unravel the ball, and wrap it in a large circle around the creatures, and the rest would take care of itself. However, it came with warnings as well. The skin wasn't something to be handled lightly. Used incorrectly, it would ensure the destruction of the entire island of Anum. Secondly, if anyone should find themselves trapped within the ring, they would not return alive. Datura and all around him could feel the importance of what Pierre held. It could be the key to ending the problems with the rifts once and for all. As the patrons each took their turn studying the object, Datura's eyes were drawn to the window. In the distance, the trees began to shake. Emerging from the forests, Massive, glowing white beasts trudged through the fog, heading straight for the water circle. Datura sprang to his feet, trailing closely behind Asher towards the circle. He watched as the alien-like creatures drew their large tendrils high into the air and viciously plunged them into the well of magical energy. Just the look of them was enough to make him sick to his gut, but as they drained the energy of the circle, he felt weakened as well. That night, 3 circles fell. Not even the arrival and assistance of the elemental lords themselves could save them. First was the fairy circle. Amidst the chaos, and perhaps to the ignorance of the townsfolk, its protection fell by the wayside. Next was the earth circle. Volk and Arden, champion and apprentice respectively, did their best to organize its protection. Its secluded and cramped location made its defense near impossible. The last to fall was the water circle. Datura and Asher resisted the demons for as long as they could, but it was not enough. Paralyzed a short distance away, they watched helplessly as the once beautiful glow of energy diminished into a flicker, and not long after, to nothing. Asher fell to her knees and wept. Datura was never good with words, consoling her with a simple hand on her shoulder. With tears in her eyes, she quietly gathered what arrows she could and ran to the air circle with a vengeance. Datura stayed behind, sifting the earth beneath where the water circle once laid between his fingers. Loss was nothing new to him, but it never got any easier. He sat, watching the ocean, contemplating for a moment the next steps. He searched his brain for answers. Could he somehow reopen the circle? Sweeping a piece of his jet-black hair from his forehead, he sighs. It felt hopeless. After a few minutes, he heard the booming voices of his brethren emerging from behind the inn. Asher and Oren, following a woman with a large silver staff, were calling all citizens to the center of town. Pierre stood on the outskirts, the ball in his hand, waiting for his cue. Datura jumped to his feet and gathered with the rest. The girl with the staff, he learned, had seen this type of thing before, and was sent by Lord Eyre to help them. Her instructions were simple. Get everyone the hell out of Holdfast as quickly as possible. The remaining elemental lords would do their best to cleanse the plane of the rift beings. Anyone left behind would perish. What happened next felt like a blur. Lord Earth and Air lured the beings into the center of the field, where Pierre wrapped the rope in a large circle around them. The woman with the staff led them further and further out of Holdfast, warning them to keep moving as fast as they could. The earth quaked and shook the citizens to their knees. Mountains were unearthed, roaring as they raised themselves out of the ground and high into the air. Tornadoes of flames scorched the land, destroying everything in their path. Tsunamis hundreds of feet tall rolled to the shores, leaving behind wreck and devastation. The citizens stood in shock, traumatized at the sight. Just as suddenly as it had started, it ended. After about a minute of havoc, the mountains slowly found their way back to the chasms they left in the earth, the fires and tornadoes settled, and the waves receded back into the ocean. Soon, all was silent. Datura's heart pounded in his ears. He tried his best to catch his breath and orient himself, but the adrenaline coursing through his veins was never-ending. The orb that had been bestowed upon him lifted off of his body and vanished into the ether. All of his magical abilities felt drained and nearly non-existent. He searched for Degrin, desperately needing some sort of leadership, but it was clear he would not get any. The group stared at one another, mouths agape, not knowing what to do next, not wanting to find out what had become of their beloved home.